All right, folks, I'm Brett Kinsella. This is GAIN, the Generative AI News Rundown. We come here every week and we talk about the top stories of generative AI. And this week we've got assistants are back in vogue, Meta and Google Bard. We have maybe an oncoming deepfake Armageddon with MrBeast and Tom Hanks in the spotlight. And I have my colleague Eric Schwartz with me here today from Voicebot.ai.
Yeah, another week, another avalanche of news.
All right. Well, we're going to try to break it all down for everybody here. If you're in the audience, let us know you're here. And I want to really get into the first story right away today because we have a lot to cover, and I want to make sure we have enough time. And I thought I'd start out with MrBeast and Tom Hanks deepfakes. And you and I have both looked at this technology for several years. We've been chronicling its advances. And there were always these concerns that it might lead to lots of bad outcomes. But frankly, there weren't that many bad outcomes initially. It was mostly good stuff. It was like making movies better and having some comedy on social media. But the scams are coming, and it seems like high quality, easily accessible, lower cost solutions are available, and now scammers are using them. And I think it's something that it's surprising. Maybe it's not surprising, but surprisingly, news media, social media, other venues are just not ready for this.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's just an extension of the ever expanding reach of scams through technology. I mean, there's a time that if somebody wanted to scam you, they'd actually pay postage and send you a letter, and then suddenly email scams became a huge thing. And as synthetic media got better and better, it became easier to you didn't just have to have a quote and then a fake quote from some celebrity. You could actually make it seem like the celebrity was speaking or filming an endorsement of something. So in some ways, it is just an extension of that. But the question is, will this fool more people than the earlier versions of similar scams did? I mean, will a video of Tom Hanks endorsing a scam convince people in a way that a claim in an email wouldn't, is the real question. And I think, unfortunately, it does come down to the where these things are popping up. I mean, they're popping up on mainstream social media sites. So there's not like that sense of like, oh, it's going to be in my spam folder, or oh, it's a clickbait at the end of a news article online.
But don't you think the answer is yes? They will be more influenced by this. I mean, we saw the Martin Lewis thing. People were like, we're investing like instantly.
It's true. I guess it's the people with influence, and not just the actual the internet influencers, but just anyone who has any sort of public presence will have to be more protective. I mean, I've written about court orders related to that in India about a celebrity's likeness because they were concerned it was going to be used without their permission, and now they have sort of a legal precedent to go after people using their likeness. But I don't know if Tom Hanks is suing anyone in particular, but these are the kinds of questions that anyone in the public eye is going to have to think about if they're going to avoid looking like they're endorsing something that steals money from people.
All right. Well, Andrew Herndon, a lot of you know Andrew from the Voicebot Synthesia team. He and I know a little bit about what's going on in this space, not just from a technical standpoint, but we've done a very large consumer survey, which will be out next month, or actually later this month, I think. And one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting is, first of all, deepfake awareness is fairly high, and it's just going to get higher with people like Tom Hanks and MrBeast involved. There's a high level of concern. There's also, there's sort of a lot of people actually like it as well. But there's a high level of concern about the technology. But one of the things that's really interesting is consumers think that banks, healthcare, insurance companies, that social media, and the news media are more prepared for this than they actually are. They actually think that they're prepared. And I know of no one that has deployed a deepfake detection solution at the enterprise. I know there's some people who have pilots out, but I know of no one who's actually said that they have it. And it's not to say they don't. People might have had it. But I don't think there's been any action on this front because, frankly, the deepfakes detection tools are brand new.
Yeah. and it's also a cost benefit thing of how much effort would it take to develop and implement that, compared to the sort of, it's so cheap to make them that they would have to deal with a real either create a really tight barrier to entry, or just have to invest a lot of resources just into stopping deepfake scams, let alone any other scam that pops up on those sites.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I know there's a bunch of people out there on LinkedIn and YouTube. Let us know you're out there. Just say where you're coming in from, what you're interested in talking about today. Johannes just dropped a note, which I have to break down a little bit for in a moment.
I know the urban legend he's talking about.
What's that?
It's an urban legend that in the early days of TV, somebody saw a headless body on the TV and thought it was real, and fainted from the shock of it. It's similar to the story of people in a movie theater seeing a movie for the first time. They saw a train rushing toward them, and they all got scared that the train was going to come out of the screen and hit them. People are simultaneously more and less gullible than we think they are. I think that people will fall for this scam a lot, but I also don't think that it'll be cause health. Tom Hanks endorsing a scam is not going to cause a health crisis.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, there will be some things that there will be bad outcomes, and if you guys want to look at that article, you can look at there's other links, and we've got this report coming out that there are these negative effects. But I will say that people are much more cognizant of phishing scams than they used to be. There's also detection technologies which are much better, but they're much more wary about looking at the source of an email that comes in. Not everybody. Some people, still fall for them, and social engineering is an art, and some people are very good at it. But I think, ultimately, more awareness about deepfakes, more awareness, like MrBeast, talking about this, Tom Hanks talking about this, generates more awareness, and people just have to be a little bit more discerning when they see this. Very famous Vladimir Zelensky. There was a deepfake of him made early in the Ukraine-Russia war, about him saying we basically have surrendered, military, lay down your arms. That was like debunked almost instantly, but it was because there's so much attention on it. Some of these other things, like the Martin Lewis scam, took a while. It actually played out over many, many hours because people weren't looking for this, and they just assumed that it was a much better deepfake as well, but they just assumed that it was probably legitimate. So I think that we just are going to need we're going to need everyone to just be a little bit more discerning about the content they consume. That's just a consequence of our era. It's not like the nefarious technology. This has been happening before the technology was as good as it is.
Yeah, and I think we'll see for the rich celebrities who can afford it, it'll be just as they in the last couple decades have all hired social media people. There's going to be someone who's the sort of the deep fake checker, someone who's out there, because they have to keep an eye on how they're being represented by other people in this.
Reputation management. It's like a new area. I think that's fair. All right, folks. Does anybody out there want to talk about assistants? I know there's a few of you in the audience that do. Oh, by the way, if you're on LinkedIn or you're on YouTube, if I didn't ask you to, please just hit that little like button for us. That's usually helpful. Subscribe too if you want on YouTube, but hit the like button. Okay, so let's talk about assistants. And we've had a couple of stories I want to break down, but let's go with the one that's newer. Made by Google yesterday. We had a little announcement from Sissy Sao, who runs the assistant team, the assistant and Bard team now. She's got a new title, which I actually didn't mention in the article. What did you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that was inevitable. We saw hints of it. The last few rounds of Bard updates were involved connecting it to Gmail and Google Calendar and so on. And it was pretty obvious that Bard was converging rapidly on what Google Assistant has done. And with the sort of shift away from Google Assistant's previous format, in terms of the ecosystem, third-party ecosystem it had, it just makes sense that they're just going to combine the two. It's a weird. I understand why it's called Assistant with Bard rather than Bard with Assistant, but it feels weird to say like, oh, this is my assistant and this is his Bard. But it just feels like an odd pairing. And hopefully they'll come up with a better name, honestly. But yeah,
there's so much to break down here. And here we go. We got McCall
Yeah.
Stanislaw, Bard with a voice. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's
Well,
like
but the reason they don't want to call it that is because they're trying to compete with ChatGPT and ChatGPT's new image functionality, where you can show it a picture. Because now Bard is angling toward the text, voice, image input system.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about this a little bit. So assistants are back in vogue was sort of one of my my things today. As we talk about it, like ChatGPT is an assistant. In fact, they called it the assistant. If you sort of look at the system information about it early on, that was revealed before they figured out how to lock that down, so people couldn't see it. And these are assistants. They're just these different types. People in the audience might know the knowing and doing assistant. If you don't, just like look at the latest Synthesia article. I come back to it there. I would actually say I've added like creating assistant as well to that. I think there's one more category, but we'll get in that another time. But this idea, does it know stuff? ChatGPT really good at that. Can it do stuff? Google Assistant, Alexa, very good at that. Sort of these integration with actions. So there's a few things on here strategically, we'll say, for Google, which came out, like I posted in LinkedIn this morning about this article. And the thing that immediately caught people's attention was that Google shut down Google Actions. Officially just a few months ago they sunsetted, but they announced it a little over a year ago, and that was just like 6 months too soon, because they had this whole developer community around Google Actions. They weren't exactly enthusiastic, but they had done that, and it was out there, and they basically just pulled it all back. No actions. The only third-party actions now are for smart home. And now they don't have that ecosystem draw. Now they've got the Android ecosystem, which is very large. So, like that's a huge asset. So the question is, like, if they're going to restart this, do they restart it with Bard? So Bard actions or whatever, they'd call it something else probably. So I think that's like one really interesting angle here. Another is that the naming of it, like Google Assistant didn't have a name. It's got the generic name, and all of a sudden they've got Bard, and they're like, ChatGPT doesn't have a name, right? That's generic. Now they come with Bard, so they're the ones with the name, unlike everybody else. And now they're putting it together with the no name. So, like, what do they do? Like, what's their plan?
I do. I do agree with that overall, but I will say, and to me, Bard isn't a name. Assistant is a job title. Bard is a job title. These are not people. These are roles.
Yes. I think that's fine. I mean, I think, like, okay, so we have this idea that around the naming, and I think there is like this inside baseball about what happens with Bard. Do they become the same thing? Does it just become Google Assistant and Bard name goes away, which I think is like perfectly plausible. But I have a feeling someone over in the branding department sort of won a debate that we're going to name it Bard as opposed to just name it like some sort of knowledge navigator.
Yeah.
And so I think they're going to try to push that. I don't know where it's going to go, but I will say that Assistant is starved of resources, starved of attention. Bard is not. Bard is getting a lot of resources and attention. So Bard is going to win. That
Yeah.
fight.
And I would encourage people watching to go back last week and the week before, I believe, we talked about the sort of differing strategy of whether generative AI is a feature infused into existing products or its own product that you then add to other things. And it sort of makes you can see that it's still a debate because of these sort of awkward naming conventions of, is this Google Assistant with generative AI, or is this new thing called Bard that can also do what Google Assistant has been doing? And unlike Microsoft, Microsoft memory holds Cortana entirely, but Google Assistant is ironically, it's too successful to pretend it never happened the way Microsoft is trying to do it with Cortana.
The side note on Cortana, that influencer we watched the video of, that she'd done sort of the different it's like she's on Instagram and she does some comedy routines on there, but she had the different assistants, and like they had Cortana in that one, and it's like Cortana's gone. Like she must have missed that. She did a new version a few days later, which showed the retirement party for Cortana. So it was super funny. Like I think people are sort of catching up that there's these different things, but like, okay, Microsoft had Cortana, a branded assistant, and they got rid of it for Copilot, an unbranded generic name.
a role, not a name. Honestly, it's maybe roles are what they think people will prefer, but it's I just think it is telling that the space, the definitions and the public preferred terms are still so unformed that there's a lot of still, I would say, testing of what is going to be popular, what's going to be, the way that every voice assistant is referred to by Amazon's term for it in some ways.
That's true. Now, Stanislawic said, devs, Chat GPT has plugins, Alexa has skills, Bard has what? Well, they have extensions. I just don't know of, and they actually had a large list of third-party extensions for Bard. They sort of pre-announced them, but like no one's seen them. They're not available. The only extensions we have for Bard right now are Google services, is to my knowledge. Is that correct?
I believe so, although there was discussion of others coming. And I think also as it continues to integrate with Google Assistant, presumably, maybe not necessarily every third-party thing, but, the bigger names or like the corporate partners will get their own assistant with Bard specific tools.
Right.
But I think mostly it is. It's Google and Google.
Yeah, it's just Google services right now. But at Google I/O, they did have they announced extensions, but no way to actually do it. And they had a slide with about a bunch of third-party applications like OpenTable and Kayak and stuff like that. And it kind of looked like they just copied the logo list from ChatGPT plugins and put Bard in front of it. But it's not surprising because it's like the same services are going to be on both platforms.
Yeah, and a lot of them are companies and services that Google, as a search engine, is so deeply integrated with. In terms of populating the search engine results page, like for flights and so on. That I don't know if it's just going to be an addition to that rather than something new.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking a bit like a closed ecosystem right now. But Scott Huffman, who ran Google Assistant and was part of sort of building out the Google Assistant ecosystem, and then they have what they were calling Maker. I think they're going to rebrand it, but they had something with this idea that they're going to support all these things, Vertex AI being the custom thing, and then, something specific for Bard and these other types of things. Mikkel just said, Google are great at announcements. They actually are they've actually been pretty good, and their timing of announcements is really fascinating.
Except for the original Bard announcement, of course.
Yeah, exactly. I just think the thing I'm wondering is whether there'll be an enthusiasm gap. So a lot of the big brands were brought into the Google Assistant ecosystem because Google sort of cajoled them into it. But I always felt like they entered it without enthusiasm. And I think it was mixed with the Alexa world, like some with enthusiasm, some without. But like mostly in Google Assistant, it was without enthusiasm. And it was basically became a self-fulfilling prophecy because they were unenthusiastic and they had sort of low numbers initially. They didn't invest in it, and then it didn't come. And it might have been a failure even if they invested a lot. So just do that. But with that, in recent memory, I wonder if they'll get that enthusiasm here. And I think in that case, one of the things I was talking about with Pete Erickson on a LinkedIn exchange is that Alexa had most of the momentum when Google Assistant came out and when these things were going on. But it wasn't like a huge gap. There was a gap. ChatGPT has all of the momentum. There is a huge gap. And so I just wonder if there's going to be an enthusiasm deficit when it comes to Bard. It's going to be harder for them to be successful.
That's why I think Google is probably smart to infuse it into existing products rather than trying to do the Bing AI or trying to make it like it's a new thing instead of trying to make it you use Google, use all these Google things. Now there's also these additional features to the things you already use. You don't have to leave.
Absolutely. And Hyderly in the audience said where Bard, I think he means Bard, probably just a typo, where Bard stands in comparison to ChatGPT and performance as of now. I don't think it doesn't match GPT-4 at the moment. I think it's as good. It's probably better than GPT 3.5. It sort of depends. Like, what do you want for performance? If you look at public benchmarks, some of the stuff with Palm 2, which drives Bard, is actually better in the public benchmarking for a lot of the standard reports. If you believe that those are actually representative of what you want from a functionality, it's better than 3.5, but doesn't match GPT-4 right now. So I think that's really where we are. But it's not just about performance, like how erudite it is in responding to your question. It's also connection to services that make a difference to you in your everyday life. And Google does have an advantage there. And Gianpaolo Cohere was like talking on LinkedIn about that with me, about, this idea of Google could win because they actually have the assets required for personalization. It's okay. So they had an advantage in knowledge with the ability to crawl the web and create LLMs. Their knowledge advantage has diminished, but they do have application advantages, services advantage, everyday applications for consumers. And that might mean that they lock in personalization, that no one else can have as much personalization. That would be a really interesting outcome. I don't think that's true, but because there's also this other thing where I was talking about that it might be they get like antitrust because they're trying to keep people from using Google services so they can't personalize, and like everyone has to use Bard. At like, oh, that's like Internet Explorer and the internet with MS Windows and my MS Office not allowing anybody like access to browse to alternative browsers. But in any event, Bard is good. Bard's going to be fine. I think it's going to have some success. I think it will ultimately displace Google Assistant as the one assistant in the Google ecosystem, because they'd love to shut things down that overlap. And I think that's okay. But I also think that it's going to be really hard for them to catch up with ChatGPT and some of these other things coming.
Right, and as Mikhail pointed out, they're really good at announcements. They announced the stuff that's going to be rolling out to early testers. And to your point about how they're trying to catch up with Amazon in terms of voice assistants, we just had all the big announcements from Amazon and from Meta and so on. And and much like when they first announced Bard, it does feel a little bit like they're trying to make sure that their name is spoken of in the same sentence as their rivals.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the timing of their releases is like totally designed to do that. Hyder Ali, the major difference is also Bard can draw on responses from the internet in real time, while ChatGPT relies on the data set. Not
anymore.
True anymore. And in fact, if you are, well, it is true if you're a free user.
Yeah.
Because the free users, I don't believe, have the real-time internet access, because that is tied to GPT-4, which is tied to plugins. And so what they have is they have a plugin. Well, it's Bing. They've got the Bing connection. And one of the interesting things about it is sometimes I can get it to automatically, if I don't have Bing selected in plugins with ChatGPT Plus, GPT-4, all that stuff, sometimes I can get it to automatically search the internet, and sometimes it won't. So there's something going on there where there's like some orchestration that's not working properly, but they do have that. So we'll see. I think that I think Bard is going to be very good. I do think that Google is better at features to products than like the core product in this case, but we'll see. Okay, let's move on. This has been fun. We probably bang that together. If anybody has other comments about this, like jump in there. I want to talk about another assistant that was announced. Well, this was a week ago, and we sort of hit on it a little bit last week, but this is Meta AI. Meta AI is the competitor to ChatGPT, to Bard, to Alexa, to Google Assistant. And Mark Zuckerberg spent precisely 2 minutes talking about it at the keynote. It's brand new. It's after a series of sort of failed activities, Zuckerberg, brought something out that I think is probably very good. It's built on Llama 2, but he didn't want to talk about it. He spent 7.5 minutes talking about entertainment-focused Meta AI. So it's basically the same thing in the background. They do some system prompts to give it some personality. You've got Paris Hilton and Snoop Dogg and all these other types of things. And this is a core thing. Our friend Dave Limp at Amazon also sort of touched on this. He talked about this idea of consumption versus creation. He said that you're thinking about generative AI as just like writing poems for you, or responding to text messages, when a lot of times it's really just around this idea of entertainment. And this is where Meta is, and it seems totally appropriate.
Yeah. Well, you say that, but what we talked about at the time, but the Meta's focus on the entertainment, I think, is, again, going back to the question of mind share and about what people think of when they think of generative AI. And while, yes, in the long term, probably there's way more money in the enterprise focus, much like voice assistants and AI assistants in general, they sort of broke the usual tech process of going from enterprise to consumer, and then said went consumer and then became adopted by enterprise. And I think Meta thinks that that's also going to happen with generative AI, where it's going to be something people play around with and use and enjoy in their personal lives, and then their companies start implementing it in their offices. And if people are comfortable using Meta AI in terms of entertainment and fun and, as you say, consumption, then they might use it for productivity as well.
Never gonna happen. It's
Well,
not.
that's what I think.
I think I just don't say it because I think particularly like focused on the, being focused on the entertainment space. It's just not gonna. People aren't gonna put the two together. I will say that one of my theses here is that if you if people like the characters that they're creating, these little personas, these meta AI driven characters, then I think it's going to be faddish, but it might actually create an on ramp for them to try Meta AI Assistant, the more general purpose assistant. That I
would also point to where Meta really has made money, which is people using their products and them gathering data from those people using their products. So if they're wanting to somehow get more or bring people back or keep people on using Facebook Messenger and Instagram and so on, then these are the kind of tools that will keep people around and generate the actual revenue for them, which is, of course, the data.
Yeah. Okay. So let's focus on this bigger story here, though, just in general, of this idea of assistants which are productivity focused, ChatGPT, Copilot, to a certain extent, Perplexity in a specific domain, Bard, versus entertainment focused. And if we look at what's happened so far, we've got character AI, super popular, mostly for digital boyfriend, girlfriend. We can talk about that a little bit. It all comes back to sex on the internet. And then we have ADOT in South Korea, which is a companion, a digital companion. But we have all these kind of entertainment-oriented activities, which are completely overshadowed by the juggernaut that is ChatGPT and the generative AI productivity assistants. I think there's two markets here. I don't think they're going to overlap that much. I think people are going to segment. This is the one I use for fun, and this is the one that I use for getting things done, being more efficient, whether in my personal life or in my work life. What do you think?
I would agree. I think the overlap would only be in the sense of a company using generative AI to create a product or platform, like, for instance, a video game, and then people for fun using those same tools to customize and play around and use and create their own stuff for that video game. But beyond that, I think you're totally right, though, that there's one space and another space, and the intersection will be confusing mostly, I think, if they try to mix them.
Yeah. And oh yeah, shout out to you. She says Meta makes money on advertising and introducing AI assistants into Meta's social environment. Could be a way of making people more comfortable around digital assistants in the brand advertising. And said, oh, okay. So that, like, we could peel this back a little bit. If you want to use the assistants, you have to do more personalization, which means they do better ad targeting. That is the type of thing that I could see is sort of a backdoor benefit to them.
Yeah.
For sure.
Interactive product placement.
Yeah, exactly. And McCall says, I will never use virtual Snoop Dogg or Paris Hilton to access my emails or calendar. I think that's exactly right. But you might play a game with Snoop Dogg as your digital dungeon master. By the way, it's like this video. It's not, the rendering is really good, but it's not as sophisticated as some other things I've seen. I think it'll get much better. I can imagine what they did with Snoop Dogg was the same thing they did with Lex Friedman. I could even put this in here. We didn't talk about that. That'll be maybe we'll talk about that next week. Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg in the metaverse, sort of the high quality of that. So I think that is going to get a lot better. But what Facebook's good at is attention, like commanding attention. A game with Snoop Dogg might be a novelty, but it might also be something that just keeps people on the site for another hour because they're like, this would be sort of fun and we'll do this. Paris Hilton she's like this Nancy Drew thing, which I think is going to be a game as well. So they've got all these other productivity things, which you would expect like Alexa to do. But I think this celebrities with games to keep attention, that's kind of a winner. What do you think?
I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, a not very complex or deep game just that had animated characters that vaguely look like the Kardashians is an insane juggernaut of revenue generating. So having Paris Hilton as like a fun game companion, you're listening to your true crime podcast and messaging with your fake crime solving friend Paris Hilton. I feel like there's a real entertainment combo there.
Yeah, and McCall comes back and says maybe a way to draw a younger audience back into the platform. They still use Messenger. This is going to show up on WhatsApp. I actually think this is a very strong play for them. They've got great technology in this space. They still have a user base that is somewhat. I think there's a lot of people in that user base that are somewhat reluctantly still using their services just because it's all the communication, the connectivity, the friend connections and the follower connections. This could be something that gets people sort of enthusiastic again. I sort of think back to the early days of gaming with like Farmville and some of the other Mafia Wars and the other games on Facebook, and how that was at a certain point in time that was very instrumental in getting people to spend more time there. And then, eventually that sort of went away. And I think that we might be seeing that era come back as a way to boost these characters. And I think also, although this isn't like a pure copy paste type of thing, I think Meta saw what character AI was doing and like just killing it from an attention standpoint. And they said, hey, I want a piece of that. But I don't think they'll get there unless they allow people to create their own digital companions. And the AI studio that they announced, I think isn't really for this no code creation of companions, at least yet.
Yeah, I mean, and they do have the image generation element to
Messenger, yeah.
But I do think you're right. But I think it's Facebook wanting to have, and their partners wanting to maintain some control over, I guess, how those brands and brands also meaning people are employed. But I think that when they're looking at their rivals, I think they're thinking TikTok more than Salesforce in this regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's stick with Meta because they're so fun to talk about sometimes. This is going to be my vote for the best headline of 2023. Facebook's new AI-generated stickers are lewd, rude, and occasionally nude. Tell me about this, Eric.
Yeah, it's hard to see. It's also an amazing caption to the photo commenting that this was the most safe image they could put together for.
Oh my gosh! Like the other ones we saw on Twitter, like child soldiers and
characters carrying weapons. I mean, there's reports of all sorts of nude celebrities and politicians, and just really feeling like there's no guardrails that are put on things like Stable Diffusion or Dolly. And I don't know if it's that they weren't expecting it to happen, or if it's just that the nature of the L made it more difficult for them to have sort of the hard. They were worried about restricting it too much, but it definitely looks like it looks like they didn't pay any attention or test it at all. Honestly, is how it looks. Whether that's true is debatable, but it did make it seem like nobody tried to type in.
They might not have been as creative as the internet.
True, but there's a social media network. They have a huge list of terms and concepts that are potentially flagged. Typing in just one of them would have revealed that there's a problem, I think.
the Waluigi with a rifle. I mean, it's like you could imagine him like marching behind Mussolini. It was like pretty crazy, but like those, and it is interesting because those were some of the more benign ones that we saw.
Yeah. Even the indie quote unquote startup image generators like Ideogram have stricter restrictions on what they'll generate than that.
Exactly. Yeah. And McCall says, and we're worrying about guardrails. Yes. Yeah. I think, the fact is that those things are like inappropriate. I don't think that Facebook wants it associated with them. But it's like, it's not starting a war.
True.
It's something that, people can deal with. And by the way, they just got a lot of free bug reports. So they'll probably fix that over the next couple of weeks.
Well, and it's not funny, haha, but when you think about how it was also revealed that they trained their models on public Facebook posts and things like that. So the training data is coming from things people are actually posting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's just do one more quick things with Meta, because they've got a lot of going on, and they sort of brought it all at the same time. So generative AI features for ads coming to all advertisers. Here's our productivity element. And this makes total sense because the people who do use Facebook for business are advertisers, right? The creative crowd. And I like actually the approach, just I like it from a business strategy standpoint, product strategy standpoint. They're going to help people do background generation, remove backgrounds, image expansion. So this is a problem. Facebook has lots of different properties, and they have different image size specs for all of them. Well, you're going to be able to use AI in order to right size a particular image for multiple, be able to use it in multiple channels. Text variations. This is also another thing. Like A/B testing is very important if you're advertising on Facebook, and it's hard sometimes to be that creative and to I need 5 variants. Okay, here's 3. Let's figure out the other 2. So I think that's super interesting. The other thing that I thought was interesting here is it's going to save time and spur productivity. Okay, makes total sense. You talk about this, and they've got this other thing in here: generative AI eases creative fatigue, but there's still room to customize. Okay, I thought that was fascinating. They are worried that creatives are going to say, Facebook, you're taking our jobs. I can't imagine there's any other reason they would say that. Even if it's true, it's such a soft benefit.
No, I agree. I think, I was thinking about this when they were talking about the image, also in terms of concern over lawsuits or in terms of the text, in terms if there's going to be any plagiarism. Advertising is a big budget line for a lot of companies. I wonder if this is if there's any concern from Meta's advertisers that they're going to fall into a trap and they don't have the safety net that some of the companies that like Shutterstock are putting on, where they say they'll take on any legal issues.
Oh yeah. I guess that's an interesting point. I suspect that they probably will do that at some point, but it's the background generation. I don't know it's going to rise to the same level of concern because I don't think that they're saying that you can just create an image right now. I think they're saying you can manipulate images you already have.
True. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I do wonder. These are all very.
It's true. I mean, it's a super good point. And all you had is another one around rogue stickers. Can we talk about the First Amendment in that context? Sure, we can. First Amendment doesn't apply to private companies in the US.
Yeah.
So they can do whatever they want. They can restrict speech. The only where they run into trouble is if the government controls them, requests that they restrict speech, and then that's a government problem. It's not even as much of a company problem.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, potentially, if people are putting weapons into Mario's hands and sharing it around all the time, Nintendo might at least have a letter sent from their legal
That's
team.
A different question. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So there's IP.
It's not a First Amendment thing, but it could be an IP issue.
And First Amendment, that's a U.S. centric consideration. Obviously, Facebook operates throughout the world, and they have more users outside of the U.S. than they have in the U.S., where in First Amendment protections don't apply there. So I don't think that that's really a thing for Facebook. They've decided long ago that they're going to moderate, and they think that's good for their business, good for their reputation, whatever it might be. But a really good point. And thanks for bringing that up. I guess you could put the rogue stickers on Twitter these days.
The bigger issue would be in terms of Europe, where the speech laws, especially for certain images, are a lot stricter.
All right, let's. Hey, folks, this is again the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week, usually at 11 a.m. Thursday Eastern time, although the last 2 weeks we've been sort of off schedule due to travel and other things, but we try to give you a quick rundown. So if you're watching, just give us a like in LinkedIn or YouTube. If you're watching afterwards, do the same. We'd appreciate that. If you're here, make some comments. Let us know what you are thinking, like a lot of the other folks have already. Also, just let us know you're here. It's good to know who's in the room, even if you don't have any questions or comments to make. Plus, we're going to have winners and losers of generative AI for the week coming up. So if you have those, throw those in the chat. All right, so we're going to do rapid fire here on a couple of things. Let's go to Funding Fountain, one of our favorite segments. So a little bit of static coming from you, Eric, potentially.
Sorry, let me check that.
Maybe it's me, but all right. So you wrote a story about generative AI learning startup Gizmo. They raised 3.5 million. What's going on here?
Yeah, so they're one of the educational focused generative AI companies that have started either popping up or educational companies using generative AI. In this case, it's for creating quizzes and flashcards for studying, and the idea is that it's to essentially have a tutor that's you can interact with and with more casual language who can instantly create any sort of study guide that you need for upcoming tests or things like that. So yeah, it will. You can put in any information that you have, whether it's notes that you've taken or the transcript of a lesson in class, and it will go through it, put it together, the key most important points, and then design a quiz or test based around like flashcards to see if you understand what you're studying. And yeah, it's one of those like it seems small, but thinking back to high school and college, having something like this would have been a lot more useful for me than having to just highlight textbooks and go back and forth and look at my notes and try to remember what I was trying to what note I was trying to write down from a teacher's lecture. So yeah, I can see this being a very useful tool for a lot of students.
Yeah, absolutely. I like this idea. Good application of technology. Let's move on to next story. You also wrote about Meeno. They raised 3.9 million, and it's Tinder's ex-CEO is involved. What's going on there?
Yeah, so as we were discussing companions, this is very much that strain of a generative AI assistant. In this case, it's not supposed to be, despite being from Tinder's former CEO, it's not about creating an AI romantic partner so much as it is a mentor slash friend coach who can help you with all kinds of social situations, including dating and making friends and dealing with fights and so on. It's a very it's specifically the founder described it as a way to help combat loneliness, not through replacing people, but by helping people be better at interacting with other people. So
this is great. I mean, I think when we talked about this idea of entertainment, I put this idea of productivity assistance. I think the companion assistant, which is what ADOT in South Korea really is, and what most of the activity appears to be on character AI is creating these companions, and it's a good use case. I mean, whether it's good psychologically for people or not, I think it's going to be very popular.
Yeah, and the company makes an explicit point of saying no, where it's not a therapist at all. But
Yes,
at the same time,
it is.
At the same time, it definitely has elements of therapy. And to be honest, that's a whole other use case. The healthcare therapy with generative AI is potentially a big space as well. But in this case, it just seems aimed at people who maybe, who need a social tutor the way that Gizmo is for academics. But
yeah, absolutely. So I think I like this. I like this like space in terms of just I think it'll be successful, and I did like the way you characterize this. It's a little bit different than this idea of a companion because maybe it's a companion but also a mentor, and so I think that's really useful. Now, we also saw Visa created a 100 million generative AI startup investment fund. This is not Visa's first fund; it's sort of like part of an existing fund. They invest in fintech and all those sorts of other things. What's the significance of this?
Well, there's a couple things. One is that we've covered over the years how banks and financial institutions are both excited by AI and kind of nervous about it. And there's definitely a boost of adoption during the pandemic, certainly on the consumer facing side of employing AI for things like customer service and carrying out banking tasks. But Visa is basically saying that they want to have the most advanced software and the most advanced AI tools for all of its customers, presumably on the commercial side as well as the consumer side. And it was interesting in their announcement. They made a big point of saying that they've been a pioneer in AI for payments for 30 years and things like that. So I think it's them wanting to be seen as a financial technology company as much as a credit card and finance company in general.
Well said. Actually, someone involved in Visa, very senior executive, said something very similar to that to me, similar to that to me a few years ago. So, like, you nailed it. Let's go on to product fountain, or excuse me, product garden. So we have funding fountain followed by product garden usually. And you wrote an article about Cohere. So Cohere is interesting because they're trying to compete against Anthropic and Google Palm and ChatGPT, and then the Microsoft Azure OpenAI services version of all of the GPT model family. And so the question is, like, how do they compete? Like, are they just one of many, and they don't have like that primary cloud partner like Anthropic just signed up with AWS $4 billion. Palm is obviously in-house. Microsoft owns 49% of OpenAI. So how does Cohere compete? And one of the things that we've talked about a lot is, like, most of these model players, even the really large ones, even though they could do general purpose, they're probably going to make it by having some domain or functional specificity. And that appears to be what Cohere is trying to do. They want to focus on, or at least really this announcement is about knowledge management. And that is low-hanging fruit for these things. Everybody's using an LLM with a RAG, retrieval augmented generation. It's a different type of, it's a vector database, like, that's supposed to give you better grounding, better answers. And I feel like everyone's using all the LLMs for that, but there is an opening just to be better at it, would be what I would suspect, because if that's all you're doing, you just focus everything towards it. And it's not that that's all they're doing, but they really talked about this idea of knowledge management and customer support as being real focus areas. And that might really help them get more traction.
Yeah, I mean, and it's notable because Cohere had put out and is promoting a chatbot they called Coral that uses its own model, its own language setup, but now pushing into the API and with RAG and so on. There's a real white labeling approach here, which I think is there's a lot of companies out there, and they all need something that can handle tasks like this. And if they don't want to, either for financial reasons or for whatever other reason, they don't want to rely on just the same three giant tech companies that so many companies already use, then Cohere offers like a real solid alternative that has a lot of the almost like a culture of like a reliable, old-fashioned IT, IBM style company.
Yeah. So, and I don't know how well or badly Cohere is doing. They've had a few announcements. They certainly don't command as many headlines as some of the other general purpose large language models. But I did hear through some channels that, like, their sales team has more leads than they can handle. Whether those convert into like big clients or not, like, that's completely different question. But it's not like for lack of activity. Like, there is some interest in Cohere. So we'll see how this goes. I really believe that if they focus on customer service, retrieval augmented generation, like knowledge management, that actually is a good strategy for them. LinkedIn unveiled some generative AI hiring tools. We have a co-pilot for the hiring manager these days.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, we talk about this every week, how there's just so much news, and sometimes it is just announcements, and sometimes in this case it is actual products, but they're almost building. It's almost just a layer on top of previously announced products. So LinkedIn's been putting out generative AI features for a while now, and now it's just a new set of tools in that regard, specifically for recruiting people and for what they call LinkedIn Learning, and as well as a marketing campaign generator. So it's a sort of a all over the place of helping companies hire people, helping people learn skills to get hired, and helping companies put out marketing campaigns. But it's hiring people is tough, and talent is always at the top or second from the top of the list of issues companies are having. So anything that speeds up that process, makes it more efficient, is great. And there's so many technical skills and so many subdivisions of technical skills that anything that can help people figure out how to get those very specific skills that they can then point to when they're getting, doing an interview for these new positions is a win for them as well.
And LinkedIn is a vassal state of Microsoft, which owns 49% of OpenAI. So we would expect the Copilot to come out. And I think that this is LinkedIn already has certain advantages over their competitors for hiring. And I think this might solidify it because it has a lot of advantages, but in some ways it's harder to use because the other ones are just very simple, sort of post review, those types of things. Where this is like you can really dig into what people are talking about, what's important to them, and that type of thing. So
yeah, and it's also it does look a little bit like it's trying to eat the lunch of some of the forums, like business and related forums, because when you're looking for skills, not only is it pulling videos from its own catalog, but it'll even offer ideas and suggestions for like the soft skills of management and delegation, and which is very much normally what I think of as people going to a Reddit type forum to look up what people think.
You don't even need to comment on this, but Instagram founders artifact, they add new AI generated image and it gets more confusing. Kevin Systrom, obviously and his co-founder, very successful Instagram founders. I'm not sure we needed this other social network. And I'm not clear like what the purpose is, but let's do winners and losers of the week. Eric, who's your winner of the week?
I'm going to say, it's tough. I think I'm going to have to say people who want to get a job, not only because of the LinkedIn aspect, but because of as we talk about the educational tools from Gizmo, because of the social skills coaching from Meeno. There's all these generative AI companies and products that are really pushing people to being better at getting a job and keeping a job.
Great. All right. My winner is Meta AI. They've had a lot of stuff under wraps. They're rolling it out. And I'm not sure it's going to be an instant success, but they're starting to take what they've spent so much time and invested so much in the lab, and they're starting to put it into useful applications. And I think that it might just be something that really rejuvenates the company, and in a way that like gets them back into a higher level of relevance. People staying in those apps longer and liking it and not feeling like they're captive. Okay, loser of the week.
I mean, that's fairly straightforward, but I would say any celebrity who has enough film and images and audio of themselves out there to be easily mimicked and turned into some sort of multi-level marketing scheme or just general scam.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Mikkel says Meta is the winner of the week. And I'm going to say Google Assistant is the loser of the week because I think Bard is just going to subsume that whole team and take over, which could be fine. Or maybe I should say that's a winner because it's going to be salvaged from irrelevance, at least in the eyes of Google executives who basically just backed off and said, "Oh, we tried." But maybe Bard's going to give it new life. But I think like the Google Assistant as we knew it is going to like fall into the background because the favorite child right now is Bard. All right, folks, this has been super fun. Thanks so much for joining us today. Give us a like and make a comment, put it in LinkedIn or YouTube. Let us know what you thought about it, what we missed, all the other good stuff. Till next week. Bye-bye.